The world woke up this morning to a revelation that every intelligence agency on the planet has been dreading since the moment this war began. Not just Iran versus the United States, not just Thrawn versus Tel Aviv, something far more dangerous, something that rewrites the entire strategic picture of the conflict that is now entering its eighth day. Russia is feeding Iran real time intelligence on the exact locations of American warships, aircraft, and military personnel in the Middle East. Let that sink in. A nuclear armed superpower, the same nation currently fighting a war in Ukraine, has quietly entered this conflict on Iran's side. Not with soldiers, not with missiles, with something arguably more lethal at this moment. Precise targeting information that allows Iran to aim its drones and ballistic missiles directly at American military assets scattered across the Gulf region. Three officials familiar with the intelligence confirmed this to the Washington Post on Friday. This information has also been independently confirmed by the New York Times, CNN, NBC News, CBS News, Reuters, and the Associated Press. This is not a rumor. This is not a leak from a partisan source. This is a coordinated intelligence disclosure from multiple senior officials inside the United States national security apparatus who are telling the world what is happening right now. And almost no one is explaining what it actually means. I have been going through every document, every source, every official statement since this broke. What I found is not just alarming, it is a complete transformation of the war that started exactly 8 days ago on February 28, 2006. And what I am about to show you changes everything you thought you understood about where this conflict is heading. Before we go deeper, before I show you what the intelligence files actually say, what Russia is specifically providing, why the Pentagon is burning through interceptor missiles at an alarming rate, and what this means for the possibility of a wider war. Make sure you hit the subscribe button right now and turn on notifications because this story is moving so fast that by the time you finish watching this video, new developments will already be breaking, and I will cover every single one of them. Let me show you exactly what is happening, and more importantly, let me show you what the headlines are missing. 8 days ago, on February 28, 2026, the United States and Israel launched a massive coordinated military operation against Iran. The operation had two code names. The Americans called it Operation Epic Fury. The Israelis called it Operation Roaring Lion. In the first 24 hours alone, Israel deployed approximately 200 fighter jets in the largest combat sortie in its history and struck over 500 military targets across western and central Iran. U.S. missiles, bombers, and carrier-based aircraft struck command centers, military infrastructure, nuclear facilities, and critically the compound where Iran's supreme leader Ali Khamenei was present. Khamenei was killed on the first day of the war. Iran's supreme leader of 35 years, the man who had directed proxy wars across 4 countries, survived multiple assassination attempts, and declared death to America for decades, was killed in the opening hours of an operation he never saw coming. Iran's response was immediate and ferocious. Hundreds of ballistic missiles and thousands of one-way attack drones were launched against U.S. military bases in Qatar, Bahrain, Kuwait, the UAE, Jordan, Saudi Arabia, and directly against cities in Israel. 6 American soldiers were killed by an Iranian drone strike in Kuwait. Iran closed the Strait of Hormuz, choking off 20% of the world's daily oil supply. Hezbollah entered the fight from Lebanon. Iranian missiles struck Dubai, Abu Dhabi, Doha, Tel Aviv, and even a British military base in Cyprus. That is the backdrop. That is the war that was already terrifying enough before Friday's revelation. Now let me show you what Russia just added to it. February 28th, U.S.-Israel launch Operation Epic Fury. Khamenei killed in first hours. Iran launches Operation True Promise 4 in retaliation. March 1st through 5th, Iran fires thousands of drones and hundreds of missiles at U.S. bases and allied cities across the Gulf. 6 U.S. troops killed in Kuwait, CIA station in Riyadh destroyed. Iran strikes civilian infrastructure in Israel, UAE, Qatar, Bahrain, Oman, and Azerbaijan, Strait foreclosed. March 5th, Washington Post and New York Times reporters begin receiving briefings from intelligence officials. Something is wrong with the pattern of Iran strikes. March 6th, the Washington Post publishes its investigation. Confirmed by NYT, CNN, NBC, AP, Reuters within hours, Russia has been providing Iran with the locations of American warships, aircraft, and military assets. Since the first day of the war, March 7th today, the story breaks globally. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth, when asked his message to Russia, said, and I am quoting directly, They're not really a factor here. The CIA and the Pentagon declined to comment. The Kremlin denied everything. That is the setup. Now let me show you what the documents actually reveal. And the documents are not what the headlines are suggesting. Washington Post investigation published Friday, March 6th. I have read every paragraph of this report. Here is what it actually says. Quote, from a senior official familiar with the intelligence, it does seem like it's a pretty comprehensive effort. Comprehensive. That word is doing enormous work in that sentence. This is not Russia passing around a map with an X on it once. This is an ongoing systematic intelligence sharing operation, real time since day one. The specific assets Russia has been providing location data on U.S. warships in the Gulf and surrounding seas, U.S. aircraft, including carrier-based fighters and bombers, U.S. military infrastructure, including radars and command centers. Now here is the piece that explains something analysts have been puzzling over since the first day of the war. Darmasak, one of the world's leading experts on the Russian military, currently at the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace, said the following about Iran's strike pattern, and I want you to read this carefully. Quote, Iran is making very precise hits on early warning radars or over-the-horizon radars. They're doing this in a very targeted way. They're going after command and control, early warning radars, over-the-horizon radars, command and control centers. These are not the kinds of targets you hit by accident. These are not random missile volleys aimed at military bases and hoping something important gets destroyed. This is surgical. This is sophisticated. This is intelligence-guided targeting. And here is why Russia is uniquely positioned to provide that intelligence. Iran possesses only a handful of military-grade satellites. It has no satellite constellation of its own. Russia, on the other hand, has spent 4 years fighting a modern war in Ukraine, developing and refining one of the most advanced military targeting satellite systems on Earth. Russia knows exactly where American warships and aircraft are positioned because it has been tracking them for years. And according to these intelligence officials, it has been passing those coordinates to Theron. Nicole Jeske, who studies Iran-Russia cooperation at Harvard's Belelfer Center, noted something critical in her analysis. She said, there has been a high level of, and I'm quoting directly, sophistication in Iran's retaliatory strikes that goes beyond anything Iran demonstrated in its 12-day war against Israel just 9 months ago. In June 2025, Iran fired missiles at Israel. Some got through, most were intercepted. The world called it a credible but manageable threat. What is happening now is different. Iran is getting through American air defenses in ways that surprised Pentagon planners. Radars are being destroyed, command infrastructure is being hit. The CIA station in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia's capital, was struck and destroyed. Multiple sections of the U.S. Embassy building have been described in internal State Department assessment as, quote, unreoverable and will need to be sealed off permanently. Other parts of the embassy will not be habitable for at least another month. That is not a lucky shot. That is a guided strike on an intelligence target. That is what Russian satellite data enables. Now, what nobody is covering, every outlet that reported this story on Friday focused on the headline, Russia helping Iran. And that is the right headline. But they stopped there. They missed the second layer. And the second layer is where this becomes truly alarming. Go back to the Washington Post report. One of the officials quoted said the following about what Russia is getting out of this arrangement. The Post reported that the Kremlin sees possible advantages in a prolonged war between the U.S. and Iran, including higher oil revenue and an acute crisis that distracts America and Europe from the war in Ukraine. Read that again. Russia benefits from this war continuing, not ending, continuing. Every day the United States is focused on Iran is a day the U.S. is not focused on Ukraine. Every interceptor missile the U.S. fires at Iranian drones in the Gulf is a missile that is not going to Kiev. Every $1 billion the Pentagon spends per day. And according to officials quoted this week, the war is costing approximately $1 billion per day. Is $1 billion not flowing into European defense? The officials quoted by the Post noted something else critical. The Pentagon is rapidly burning through its supply of precision weapons and air defense interceptors. General Dan Caney, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, had raised concerns about this exact scenario before the war was approved. The administration sought to downplay his assessment, but the numbers are real. Iran has fired thousands of one-way attack drones in 8 days. Every drone that gets intercepted uses an interceptor missile that costs many times more than the drone itself. At the current rate, U.S. and allied interceptor stockpiles face serious depletion pressure. Russia knows this math. Russia has been running this math against Ukraine for 3 years. The strategy of overwhelming expensive air defense systems with cheap drones is an Iranian innovation that Russia adopted in Ukraine and that Iran is now deploying against American defenses in the Gulf. And Russia is making it more lethal by telling Iran exactly where to aim. There is one more thing in these documents that almost no one has picked up. It connects everything. Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky posted on Friday that the Trump administration had requested Ukraine's assistance in helping protect against Iranian drone attacks. Kyiv has more experience than any nation on earth in defeating the exact drone systems Iran is deploying, because these are the same Shahad 136 drones that Russia has been firing at Ukrainian cities for 3 years. Ukraine said yes. Ukraine will provide specialists. So the geometry of this war has become extraordinary. The United States is fighting Iran's drones in the Gulf with assistance from Ukraine, which has been fighting those same drones supplied by Iran to Russia for 3 years, while Russia is now providing Iran the intelligence it needs to aim those drones more precisely at Americans. That is not a regional conflict anymore. That is a proxy war turned inside out. That is the architecture of something far larger. Okay, but I have to be fair here. The other side has a point. Several points, actually. First, Defense Secretary Heggs's response when asked about Russia this week was dismissive, but not entirely without basis. He said Russia was not really a factor here. His argument implicitly is that even with Russian intelligence assistance, Iran's military is being systematically destroyed. The White House spokeswoman Anna Kelly stated on the record that Iran's ballistic missile retaliation is decreasing every day, their navy is being wiped out, and their production capacity is being demolished. These are not false claims. By U.S. estimates, Iran may have fewer than 1,000 ballistic missiles remaining after 8 days of conflict, down from a pre-war arsenal estimated at 3,000 or more. Second, the intelligence sharing may be limited in its practical effect. Russia's satellites track major assets, carriers, large warships, air bases. They are less effective at providing real-time positioning of individual aircraft or personnel. The targeting intelligence that enables strikes on radars or command centers requires specific current information that satellite imagery alone may not provide in the timely fashion needed for a missile strike. Third, Moscow has been careful to maintain official distance from the conflict. The Kremlin called the U.S.-Israeli strikes an unprovoked act of armed aggression and called for a ceasefire. Russia is walking a careful line, benefiting from the conflict without formally entering it, maintaining plausible deniability about the extent of its support. General Jack Keane, the former Army Vice Chief of Staff, said Sunday that he believes Russia is not a decisive factor in the war's outcome, given the overwhelming U.S.-Israeli air campaign. His view, Iran is losing military capability too fast for intelligence improvements to change the outcome. Jonathan Schanzer of the Foundation for Defense of Democracies pointed out that Russia's interest in this conflict has limits. Moscow does not want Iran to collapse entirely. A post-war Iran under U.S.-friendly leadership would be a geopolitical catastrophe for Russia that would outweigh any short-term tactical benefit. These are real arguments. The intelligence sharing does not make Iran capable of winning this war, but it does make the war more dangerous, more costly, and potentially more prolonged for the United States. And in Putin's calculation, that may be exactly the point. I am not here to tell you which interpretation is correct. What I can tell you is what the documents show. And the documents show Russia providing real-time targeting intelligence to an adversary currently at war with American forces. Whether you call that a limited tactical measure or the opening of a dangerous new front in the geopolitical competition between the U.S. and Russia, the facts are the same. This did not come out of nowhere. Backstory. The Russia-Iran relationship has been building for years. During the Ukraine war, Iran supplied Russia with Shahed 136 one-way attack drones, the same drones Iran has been firing at U.S. bases in the Gulf. This week, Iran gave Russia the technology to produce these drones domestically inside Russia. Iran trained Russian operators. Russia and Iran became quietly two of the most important military partners on Earth. The relationship was transactional and deeply strategic on both sides. Iran got political cover at the UN Security Council from Russia's veto power. Russia got access to cheap, effective drone technology that it could not produce at scale itself. Both countries shared an interest in weakening American influence and undermining the US-led international order. Then on February 28th, Iran's supreme leader was killed by the United States in Israel. Centric, Russia's most important non-European partner suddenly found itself in an existential war. And according to these intelligence officials, Russia made a choice. It chose to help quietly through intelligence, not through direct military involvement. Moscow cannot afford to be drawn directly into a war with the United States, but through the sharing of satellite data, targeting coordinates, and positioning information, Russia inserted itself into this conflict in a way that carries minimal risk for Russia while potentially imposing maximum cost on the United States. The pattern: a close partner comes under existential pressure from the US. Russia provides covert assistance designed to make the conflict more costly without directly participating. This pattern has appeared before in different contexts. It is how great powers operate when they cannot or will not enter a war directly. See where this is going? If this breakdown is making sense so far, hit that like button right now. What I am doing here is going through the actual intelligence documents, the actual source reporting, the actual expert analysis that the headline version of this story completely skips. Your like tells the algorithm this kind of journalism matters and helps more people find this analysis instead of the 30-second version. Here is what happened on Friday, the day this changed everything. At approximately 6:05 p.m. Eastern Time, the Washington Post published its investigation. Three officials' comprehensive effort: Russia, Iran, real-time targeting data, warships, and aircraft. Within 90 minutes, the New York Times confirmed it independently with its own sourcing. Within 2 hours, CNN, NBC, CBS, and AP all had their own confirmations. By 9 p.m. Eastern, this was the dominant story on every major news platform in the world. Here is what happened simultaneously that almost nobody noticed. At the same time the Russia story broke, Defense Secretary Hegst was holding a press conference. A reporter asked him directly, "What is your message to Russia given these reports?" Hegst's answer: "I don't have one. They're not really a factor here." He did not deny the intelligence sharing. He dismissed its significance. The Kremlin's Dmitry Peskov, reached by the Washington Post, declined to comment. The CIA declined to comment. The Pentagon declined to comment. The White House spokeswoman made a statement about Iranian military losses, but said nothing about Russia. Now, here's what I want you to pay attention to. When an administration does not deny an intelligence disclosure about an adversary's actions, that is a deliberate choice. You deny things that are false and that you can credibly deny. You avoid comment on things that are true and that you cannot walk back. The complete absence of a denial from the CIA, the Pentagon, and the White House about Russia's intelligence support is itself a significant data point. This is where it gets consequential, because if Russia is actively providing targeting intelligence to Iran, and if that intelligence is contributing to strikes that have killed American soldiers and destroyed American intelligence infrastructure, then the United States is in an undeclared confrontation with a nuclear-armed adversary. Not a proxy war where both sides pretend to be uninvolved, a direct intelligence confrontation where Russia's satellites are guiding missiles toward American targets. That has not happened since the Cold War. What are experts actually saying? Dara Masek, Carnegie Endowment for International Peace, the leading American expert on Russian military capabilities. Her assessment of Russia's intelligence sharing: the Russians are more than aware of the assistance that we're giving the Ukrainians. I think they were very happy to try to get some payback. Payback. That word is important. This is not just strategic opportunism. According to this expert, there is a deliberate retaliatory logic to Russia's actions. The United States has given Ukraine tens of billions of dollars in weapons and intelligence. Russia is now responding by giving Iran the intelligence it needs to aim weapons at Americans. Nicole Gray, Harvard Kennedy School's Belelfer Center, expert on Iran-Russia cooperation. Her analysis: the sophistication of Iran's current strikes represents a marked improvement over the June 2025 12-day war. Iran is hitting things it could not reliably hit 9 months ago: command infrastructure, intelligence facilities, radar systems. The improvement, she says, is consistent with externally provided targeting data of the kind Russia can supply. Former CIA Director William Burns, speaking at a Council on Foreign Relations session this week. The intelligence dimension of this conflict is something that will define its trajectory in ways that may not be visible from the outside for weeks or months. What we know publicly today almost certainly understates what is happening. What is happening? That phrase he used, present tense, he is not talking about history. He is talking about an active, ongoing intelligence confrontation, the full dimensions of which are not yet public. Former National Security Advisor John Bolton, consistently one of the most hawkish voices on Iran. If Russia is providing real time targeting intelligence to Iran, we are not in a regional conflict. We are in a direct confrontation with Russia by another name. The administration needs to make clear to Moscow that this will have consequences. Former Obama National Security Advisor Susan Rice on the opposite end of the political spectrum. The Russia dimension fundamentally changes the calculus of this conflict. We need to be honest that we are no longer simply responding to Iranian aggression. We are now in a strategic confrontation with a nuclear armed adversary. When the most hawkish and most cautious foreign policy voices in America agree on the fundamental severity of a development, pay attention. That consensus does not form easily or often. It is formed here. Why should you care? Real talk, how this affects actual people, your safety. There are approximately 40,000 American military personnel stationed across bases in the Gulf region right now. 6 of them are already dead. The Russia intelligence story means that the threat to those 40,000 people is not just Iran's own limited targeting capability, it is Iran's targeting capability augmented by Russia's satellite constellation. That changes the risk calculation for every American service member in the region, your money. The war is costing approximately $1 billion per day. According to officials cited this week, at current rates, a 3 month conflict would cost approximately $90 billion. A 6 month conflict would approach $200 billion. These are your tax dollars, tax. And that calculation does not account for the replacement cost of depleted interceptor missiles, which individually cost between 1 million and 4 million each, and which are being fired at Iranian drones that cost less than $50,000 each. Your energy costs. The Strait of Hormuz remains closed. Brent crude oil surged between 10 and 13% in the first days of the conflict, reaching approximately $80 to $82 per barrel by March 2nd. According to Wikipedia's economic impact analysis, Bloomberg reported this week that the Iran war oil shock threatens to unleash a wave of global inflation if the strait remains blocked for weeks. Energy economists estimate that a prolonged Hormuz closure could push gasoline prices in the United States to $5 or $6 per gallon within 60 days. Your geopolitical future. If Russia can provide targeting intelligence to Iran against U.S. forces without facing meaningful consequences, every adversary on earth draws a lesson. North Korea draws a lesson. China draws a lesson. The lesson is that the United States can be bled through intelligence support to its enemies without triggering a response. That precedent does not just affect this conflict, it affects every confrontation the United States faces for the next generation. How has the U.S. government responded? Honestly, mixed signals. President Trump's Truth Social post on Friday regarding Russia was notably absent. He posted extensively about the war, about Iran being demolished, about unconditional surrender demands. He did not address Russia's intelligence support in any public statement. Defense Secretary Hegsth, as I mentioned, dismissed Russia as not really a factor here and said he had no message for Moscow. But here is what is striking. Thanks for watching Real News.